$2. That was the exact price tag my parents put on my entire existence. I watched my sister scream in absolute joy as my father handed her the keys to a brand new, custom-ordered luxury car. Then, my mother turned to me, smiled a dead plastic smile, and handed me a cheap plastic piggy bank. Inside were 2 single-dollar bills. My name is Evelyn. I am 32 years old, and I am the architect of my family's absolute financial and social ruin. To understand the sheer magnitude of what I did to them, you have to understand the nightmare I crawled out of. In our household, the rules were simple. My younger sister, Chloe, was the undisputed queen of the castle, and I was the peasant born to serve her. From the moment she could walk, she was the golden child. She possessed this uncanny ability to manipulate my parents with a single tear. If she broke a vase, I was punished for leaving it too close to the edge of the table. If she failed a math test, my parents yelled at me for not tutoring her properly, completely ignoring the fact that I was busy studying for my own advanced placement exams. I was the invisible workhorse. I maintained perfect grades. I won state science fairs. I secured a full-ride scholarship to a prestigious university to study structural engineering. I thought, naively, that excellence would buy their love. I thought if I just worked hard enough, if I became successful enough, they would finally look at me with the same adoration they reserve for Chloe. I was wrong. Excellence only made me more useful to them. By the time I was 20 years old, I was essentially funding my own existence and heavily subsidizing theirs. I worked 3 part-time jobs between my engineering classes. I paid for my own groceries. I bought my clothes from thrift stores. Meanwhile, Chloe was on her 3rd attempt at a private liberal arts college, changing her major every semester because she found the reading assignments too stressful. She racked up credit card debt buying designer bags and going on weekend trips to luxury resorts with her friends. And who do you think quietly paid the family's skyrocketing electricity bills? Who paid for the roof repairs? I did. I was the silent pillar holding up their pathetic facade of upper-middle-class wealth. But every pillar has a breaking point. Mine came on a freezing Christmas Eve. 10 years ago. The house smelled like roasted cinnamon and expensive pine. The extended family was gathered in the living room. Chloe had just dropped out of college again, but my parents were treating her like a war hero who had just returned home. My father stood up, clinked his champagne glass, and announced he had a special gift to encourage Chloe in her new chapter. He walked her to the front window and pointed to the driveway. There it was, a sleek, midnight black, luxury vehicle. It cost over $80,000. My parents had secretly taken out a massive second mortgage on our childhood home just to finance it. They literally gambled their shelter to reward her chronic failures. The room erupted in applause. Chloe was sobbing happy tears. I stood in the corner, holding a tray of appetizers I had spent 3 hours preparing. My mother walked over to me. She did not look me in the eyes. She handed me a small, neon-pink plastic piggy bank. She patted my shoulder and whispered that I needed to learn the value of saving for my future. I looked down at the plastic pig. I shook it. 2 coins? No. I opened the rubber stopper at the bottom. 2 crumpled $1 bills fell into my palm. A strange, terrifying calm washed over me. Have you ever felt that? When the anger inside you burns so intensely that it bypasses rage and turns straight into ice. In that exact fraction of a second, the desperate, unloving daughter they knew ceased to exist. I walked upstairs to my room. It was 1 a.m. I pulled a heavy black duffel bag from the back of my closet. I packed only the absolute essentials. 7 days worth of sensible clothing, my laptop, my engineering notebooks, and my birth certificate. I left everything else. I left the expensive jewelry they had forced me to buy them for past Mother's Days. I left the photo albums. I stripped the bed sheets so the room looked entirely vacant. At exactly 2 a.m, while the house was deep in a champagne-induced sleep, I walked out the front door into the blinding snowstorm. I did not leave a dramatic note. I did not send a goodbye text. I wanted them to wake up to a ghost. I drove my beat-up 15-year-old sedan across 3 state lines until the engine nearly gave out. I settled in a city where no one knew my name. The first 3 years of my disappearance were brutal, and I ate cheap instant noodles for almost every meal. I slept on a thin, stained mattress I found abandoned in an alley. I worked low-level drafting jobs during the day and took freelance architectural projects at night. But I worked with the kind of ruthless, unrelenting obsession that only comes from deep, unresolved trauma. I channeled every ounce of my betrayal into my career. By year 4, I was promoted to senior project manager at a top-tier civil engineering firm. By year 6, I broke away and started my own independent consulting agency, specializing in high-stakes commercial infrastructure. By year 8, my net worth crossed into the high 7 figures. I wore custom-tailored suits. I lived in a penthouse overlooking the skyline. I was untouchable. But what about the golden family I left behind? Oh, the universe has a hilarious way of balancing the scales when the scapegoat stops funding the circus. Without my income silently covering their basic utilities and property taxes, and with Chloe's insatiable appetite for the luxury lifestyle she felt entitled to, their financial house of cards began a rapid, catastrophic collapse. Chloe totaled the $80,000 car in less than 7 months. She drove it into a ditch while texting. Of course, they had let the premium lapse, so the insurance covered nothing. My parents, desperate to keep her happy, took out predatory personal loans to buy her a replacement vehicle. Then came the credit card max outs, the desperate attempts to maintain their country club memberships. That is when the messages started. After years of absolute silence, my phone lit up. It was a text from my mother. She said her heart ached for me. She said they missed my smile. And then, in the very next paragraph, she asked if I could wire them $15,000 to help with some unexpected medical emergencies. I did not reply. When the silent treatment did not work, the manipulation turned vicious. My father left unhinged voicemails, his voice dripping with venom, calling me an ungrateful traitor. He said I owed them for giving me life. Chloe took it a step further. She launched a coordinated smear campaign on social media. She wrote long, fabricated, tearful posts about how her cruel, sociopathic, rich older sister had abandoned their sick, aging parents to starve in the cold. Distant relatives I had not spoken to in over a decade flooded my inbox with absolute vitriol. They tried to track down my business partners to ruin my professional reputation. They wanted to drag me back down into the mud with them. They thought I was prey. They forgot I was the engineer who built their foundations. And I knew exactly which load-bearing walls to destroy to bring the whole house down. I hired a private investigator and the most aggressive, cutthroat financial attorney in the state. I told my lawyer I did not just want to send a basic cease and desist letter. That was child's play. I wanted total, undeniable, suffocating control over their lives. My attorney dug into their public records and uncovered a masterpiece of financial incompetence. Remember that massive second mortgage they took out for Chloe's luxury car? They had completely defaulted on it. They were drowning in hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt. The bank had already initiated the pre-foreclosure process. They had less than 90 days before the bank auctioned off the family home and threw them onto the street. I saw my opening. I set up a blind trust, a completely anonymous corporate entity registered in a different state. Through my lawyer, I approached the regional bank holding their toxic debt. I made a quiet, off-the-market offer. I bought their mortgage. I bought it entirely in cash. It cost me a significant portion of my liquid assets, but to me, it was not an expense. It was the price of admission for the greatest psychological performance of my life. I legally owned the roof over their heads. I was their landlord, their bank, and their executioner. I waited patiently for Thanksgiving Day, as I knew their predictable patterns. It was the one day of the year they always hosted a massive, extravagant dinner to show off their fake wealth to the entire extended family. I knew the whole bloodline would be sitting around that giant mahogany table, eating expensive roasted turkey and undoubtedly gossiping about what a massive disappointment I was. I drove back to my hometown. I wore a pristine charcoal gray designer suit. I parked my own luxury vehicle, completely paid off in cash, right behind Chloe's leased, dented sedan. I walked up the snowy path to the front door. I did not knock. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the original brass key I had kept on my keychain for 10 years. I unlocked the door and stepped into the grand foyer. The loud chatter and laughter bleeding from the dining room instantly died, the second my footsteps echoed on the hardwood floor. I walked slowly into the dining room. 30 pairs of eyes snapped toward me. The silence was so absolute, so suffocating, you could hear the firewood crackling in the hearth. My mother dropped her crystal wine glass. It shattered into 100 pieces across the floor, the red wine pooling like blood. My father's face turned a violent shade of crimson. He stood up so fast his heavy wooden chair crashed backward onto the floor. He opened his mouth, drawing a breath to scream, to demand to know how I dared to trespass in his home. I raised one single finger. That's just one microscopic gesture of pure, unadulterated authority, and the words died in his throat. I walked to the center of the dining table. I tossed a thick, heavy black leather folder directly onto the pristine white tablecloth, right next to the gravy boat. I looked dead into my father's wide, panicked eyes. I spoke with perfect, calculated, terrifying clarity. I told them I was not there for the turkey. I was there to conduct official corporate business. As I instructed Chloe to open the folder, my sister, her hands trembling violently, reached out and flipped the leather cover open. Inside was a stack of legally binding documents. At the very top was the deed of trust, showing the immediate transfer of the property to my corporate entity. Right beneath it was a formal stamped eviction notice. I watched their eyes scan the paperwork. I watched the exact moment their brains processed the reality of the situation. They had exactly 30 days to vacate my property before the county sheriff arrived to physically remove their belongings onto the curb. The color completely drained from my mother's face. Her knees buckled and she collapsed back into her chair. She started hyperventilating. The fake pride vanished, replaced instantly by pathetic desperation. She started sobbing, begging me, telling me that we were blood, that they were my family, that they had raised me from birth. I smiled. I gave her the exact same dead, plastic, terrifying smile she had given me a decade ago on Christmas Eve. I reached deep into the pocket of my tailored coat. I pulled out that cheap, faded, neon pink plastic piggy bank. I placed it gently on top of the eviction notice. I cracked the rubber stopper open. 2 single, crumpled dollar bills fell out and landed softly onto the legal documents. I looked at my mother, tilted my head, and said, "I am simply returning your original investment, plus 30 days of free rent. Consider it my generous holiday bonus to the golden child." I did not wait for a single response. I turned on my heel and walked out the front door. Behind me, the house erupted into absolute chaos. I heard Chloe screaming hysterically. I heard my father yelling in pure, unfiltered panic. I heard the distant relatives murmuring in utter shock. But the noise did not touch me. The cold winter air felt absolutely incredible against my skin. I got into my car, started the quiet, powerful engine, and drove away, leaving them completely trapped in the burning ruins of the fake empire they had tried to build on my spine. Never let anyone, especially your own blood, convince you that loyalty means being a perpetual punching bag. Sometimes, the only way to win a rigged, toxic game is to buy the entire board, flip the table over, and walk away with all the dice. If you are the scapegoat of your family, stop trying to prove your worth to people who are absolutely committed to misunderstanding you. Build your empire in total silence, and let your ultimate success be the loudest, most ruthless noise they ever have to hear. Tell me in the comments, what is the absolute most toxic thing a family member has ever tried to justify as unconditional love? Drop a black heart emoji in the comments if you are out there breaking generational curses, and hit that subscribe button if you want more stories of pure, unadulterated, cold-blooded karma.